all of us in the WTVA 9 Weather Authority are trying to think back through our memories of what went on April 27th, 2011, where we were and what happened, and frankly, how it affected things going forward. And I want to first and foremost correct a little misspeak I said on the air. Not a little misspeak, a big misspeak. One of the things I said during our 6 o'clock broadcast tonight is that hopefully the lessons learned make a difference in saving lives going forward. I want to scratch that for a moment here. Clearly, we hope that in some cases that we can do that. But one of the big takeaways from that 2011 outbreak is that if you don't know that you're in a warning, or if you don't have a substantial enough structure to get into, that you could die if the tornado is strong enough. And so in the case of that outbreak, in some cases the tornadoes were just too strong for a sturdy structure to be sturdy enough. You needed a reinforced structure. So I want to make sure to convey that fully, first and foremost. For me, it was weird. We had just moved here to Tupelo within the last month. I sometimes wonder what management thought about me. You know, you brought in this kid to replace, your veteran chief meteorologist that was in his 70s, and here we are talking about death and destruction potentially on the way, massive tornado outbreaks, and you just have to ask the question, did they think that they had made a mistake promoting someone to that beforehand, before it actually happened? I know myself, I look back and I think of how scared I was both directions. Either A, this verifies and this actually happens and it's really bad, or B, this doesn't happen and no one here is going to trust me ever again. And I distinctly remember the night of the East Webster tornado, obviously the early morning of the 27th, just every storm looked like it was trying to rotate and produce a tornado, but it was night, you're getting no reports in. I mean, I sort of know the area. I've worked really hard to study it, but I don't know it perfectly. And so you're tracking these, and we have this storm that looks like a hurricane on radar. I mean, it literally has the arms that make up a hurricane and then the hole in the middle where the massive tornado damage is occurring, swirling around that, widespread damage. And I just remember thinking just how incredible the setup seemed at that point, and not knowing for sure if it was doing the bad things we thought it was. And clearly we find out later that it did cause damage and death and substantial damage in many cases. Then I went home and went to sleep. Our meteorologist, Jennifer Watson, at the time, morning meteorologist, covered things and watched over the storms. I get awakened early in the morning with a tornado warning, clearly from my house. I get weather call goes off on my phone. I still had it set up from when I was in Texas. I just changed the location to here. It wasn't something we were offering on WTVA at that point. It woke me up. I was like, what in the world is this? And about 2 or 3 seconds later, the tornado sirens go off, and then a rush of wind hits my house. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness. And so I did the thing you're not supposed to do. I pull up my phone, I pull up radar scope, and I go, well, what's going on? And then I realize, wait, I need to get to my shelter, to the bathroom that's a shelter in our house. And I go there and I kind of figure out what's going on. And clearly at that point, only with about an hour and a half, 2 hours sleep at that time, it's time to get ready. So I hop in the shower. I mentioned this tonight on the air, and it is my most vivid memory of that day. Remember, I get in the shower, washing my hair, and I'm just standing there and I'm trying to think, is there any way that this doesn't happen? Is there any way that we don't have terrible storms? I didn't really say it to myself. I got out of the shower. I immediately called my boss, Jeff Houston, who's now at ABC 3340 in Birmingham. And I told him, I just don't think there's a way around it. I think this is just going to be that bad. I've tried to figure out a way where it doesn't happen. It's not that bad. And it's going to be that bad. And then, frankly, everything is largely a blur between there and the time we come off of the air. Because every storm we track is terrible. Every storm we track looks like it's producing damage. It looks like it's violent. This is a new environment for me still. Yeah, I've tracked storms for 7 years at that point. I was chief meteorologist for 4 years in Texas before we moved here. So, I tracked tornadoes, but I'd never tracked anything any number of tornadoes so violent. You have a tornado that's probably going to kill somebody if left unattended, and you've got to leave it because there's another tornado on the radar screen that could kill people if left unattended. Oh, and then there's another one there that might be a tornado on the ground, and there's another one up there that could be as well. I just remember feeling helpless, that we were abandoning people. And for me, one of the hardest things is when I go back and I watch the coverage we put together of Smithville, how there's a point where we're talking about it, we have it in the storm track, we show it getting closer, the tornado's probably picked up at this point, and then we go away. We have to check out some of the other storms they're bad at that point, and it breaks my heart every time, because I know that the next time we make it to Smithville, it will have hit, it will have killed people. And you think that there's something else you could have done. The way we typically cover tornadoes now is I will typically, if we know we have one that is likely, causing major damage, could be causing death, we stick with it. That's not to say we wouldn't have that day. It's just you can't stick with it if you have two that are doing that. You've got to go to the other one. And that means you have somebody that's hanging on every word, and you got to go to a different one. It's still, I put myself back in my shoes from that day, and I want to say we would do it better. We would do something different, but it's hard to. I mean, there would be things we would do different. Clearly, we'd have more storm tracks. There's a lot of things we'd do differently, and we try to do differently now. Emily reminded me of this one. She called me after watching the national news. She was still back in Texas at that point. And she called me, she's like, "Are you okay?" And my reply was, "Yeah, why? Why ask?" Because even by the time national news had happened, I can't remember if it was before or after the 6 o'clock show, I'd already stuck that in a nice, neat little box, and we'd shove that up on a shelf, and I'm not going to think about that. A lot of people compartmentalized what happened that day. And for me, that's what I largely did to get by, because when that many people, no one had ever died on my watch before. On a storm that we covered, no one had ever died before until that day. And then it happened in mass. And you wonder how much of that is on you. But the reality is that you can just do your best. That's all you can do. So not to leave it on a somber note, I think one of the most amazing things to come out of that day is the way people did rally to rebuild these many, many, many communities that had a lot of damage. Remember, we were part of a group of people that put together a telethon to raise money for those that had damage. And over time, cities have come back. In many cases, they've come back stronger. Not in all. But I think one of the most amazing things is how, and maybe it's just from me, being a meteorologist, knowing, the event Andover 91 that helped me to become a meteorologist, that April 27th, 2011 was the event that, helped Chelsea, one of our meteorologists, decide she wanted to be a meteorologist, to try to help people, try to save lives. Alexandra Kent, who works for the National Weather Service, she's in the Dakotas now, and she's one of the people that helps put out the tornado warnings to try to save lives. Johnny Parker from Monroe County always was a weather enthusiast. He pursued his degree, got it from Mississippi State, has developed a national following of people that he puts out information for, life-saving information. So there are lots of people's lives just from those three people that for the next 40 years could be saved because of what happened that day. And ultimately, that's the way you have to look at this, is that it was a terrible event. And obviously, when it's bad enough, the number one thing you can do is pray for these people that are in the path. But know that God makes all things work together for our good. And in the case of the 2011 Super Outbreak, that there are a lot of people that take severe weather seriously. There's a generation of people that know why they should seek their safe place, and those people's lives could be saved. Doesn't make it any easier, That's why we remember those that lost their lives, those that were injured. We learn from our lessons, and we're hopeful for what the future holds. So, for me, that's what I remember about the 2011 super outbreak.